Welcome back to this episode of Voices, a special series of the Latino Vote podcast, where I'm sitting down and talking with former California State Senate President Kevin De León. In this episode, we talk about what's ailing national Democrats, what they need to do to fix it, the controversial behaviors and actions of city council members during this racially charged moment of illegal recordings on the Los Angeles City Council, and perhaps most importantly, what's next for Kevin De León. What I'm saying is that the leaders in the Democratic Party sound a lot like the leaders of the Republican Party of the 80s and 90s when I grew up. Does that make sense?
Well, I'll say this is that the Democratic Party, I've always been a Democrat because of the values and principles
Yeah.
that we share. It is historically has been an inclusive party.
Mm-hmm.
It's a party that, to some degree, has been reflective to some degree of the rich diversity of
Yeah.
who we are, the beautiful mosaic of this great country.
Yeah.
It's been a party that has not historically been hostile towards the immigrant
Yep.
community. I think you made a couple illustrations with regards to 187,
Yeah.
then Governor Pete Wilson, and the very hostile, pernicious um, rhetoric of the GOP towards immigrants. Um, I uh, I don't care. Listen, if you graduate summa cum laude, or magna cum laude from Harvard or Yale, uh, or Princeton, or Stanford, or Cal, or UCLA. Um, but my concern is elite voices are being heard more so than working class forces. And working class bedrock issues we have to address. Now, you asked me a question
Mhm.
earlier, which is, do I regret not working on issues that would be perceived as bedrock issues with regards to working class folks? I wouldn't accept your premise,
Yeah.
the way it's framed,
Okay.
because I do believe, helping negotiate to raise the minimum wage at the time, which was the largest minimum wage increase in the nation at the time. It's increased more so since then. But working on issues to lift folks out of poverty has always been part of my DNA, my makeup. If you're gonna ask, do we have to do this, writ large at a macro scale, even more so? And some of the cultural issues have overtaken or subsumed, if you will, because that's what's sexy. That's what drives the media. That's what, there's no question about it. I think that, you know, Ruben Gallegos, who
Mhm.
was elected for U.S. Senate
Arizona.
in Arizona when Arizona went Trump,
Mm-hmm.
but they went with Ruben Gallego, is a very fascinating illustration of a playbook. I'm not saying that's the panacea, but we have to look at things that resonate with Latino families, with African American families, working class folks who historically, have been at the lowest economic strata for years, if not decades. We've seen some progress, but we have to do
Mm-hmm.
much more than that. And if we believe that we're just going to be the party of consultants and advisors, and I'm from the University of Chicago. Again, nothing against those amazing, excellent academic institutions, the elite of the elite that produce those who have been the leaders of this country. Um, uh, God, I'm one of the luckiest individuals, on planet Earth. Again, youngest child, single immigrant mother, third grade education, the only one to graduate from high school. And be mindful about one thing. Usually, when there's a story about me, it's the kid who goes on a full ride scholarship to Harvard or Yale,
Right.
and then goes on to McKinsey or whatever consulting group, ends up as a White House fellow, and
Yeah.
and then runs for Congress and then runs for U.S. Senate and becomes a cabinet secretary, whatever, et cetera. I applaud all those individuals
Of
without a
course.
doubt. I graduated from college, I should say from high school, barely with the skin of my teeth.
Yeah.
I barely graduated. If it was not for affirmative action, there was no way in hell would I have been admitted to UC Santa Barbara. I went through what they call special action. Special action gives EOP director, admission officer, the subjectivity to say Mike Madrid doesn't meet our I think it was A through A B C D E F G. I think it was A through F at the time. Mike Madrid doesn't meet our A through F, you know, academic requirements. He doesn't meet the GPA, standards. He doesn't. His SAT scores are not even within the ballpark. I was not in the ballpark in either of the three categories, but they took a subjective decision. I mean, said if we take this young man and we, surround him with all the academic support services, we believe he can be someone or he can do well. Suffice it to say, I didn't do well. It wasn't their fault.
Mhm.
You know, that's why I was, but that's what I'm saying is that you will get leaders sometimes who are from the working poor, from the working class, who don't have that exact, trajectory to an elite university. We cannot, you know, continue to be elite and distant, maybe theoretical. And I think immigration reform is illustrative of that. We talk about immigration reform. Vote for me, Mike, because if you vote for me, I'll get an immigration reform. I win the election, and Mike Madrid says, "Hey, we need immigration reform." Oh, you know what, man? We got to do some other issues right now. We got to deal with some tax issues. We got to deal with some global issues. Happening across the world right now. We got some issues with regards to Taiwan and China, or we have to deal with North Korea and Pyongyang right now. Like, wait. What's Pyongyang have to do with me here? I need to be legalized because I'm working my ass off, and I'm like this all the time, and I've been in this country 30 years.
Mhm.
30 years.
Yeah.
So, and this is not new, but my friends in Washington, we've had the conversation, ad nauseum with my friends in Congress. I had a buddy of mine called me the other day from Congress a couple days ago, and we were talking about the Democratic response, with
Yeah.
the little signs come
Yeah.
up here, and I just shook my head. And this individual, concurred as well too, and was not part of it, but concurred as well too. We kind of have this sort of this response
Yeah.
is just tepid and weak.
But let's talk about Ruben Gallego for just a moment, because Ruben was a member of the Progressive House Caucus. He's now one of the few Latinos who is in the House Democratic House Border Security Conference. He voted for the Lake and
We
Riley
did.
Act.
We did.
He didn't allow the term Latinx to be used in his office.
I don't use Latinx either.
Right. So he's culturally and from an immigration perspective, and the whole thesis of his campaign was talking to Latino men on construction sites, at boxing rings, at
Chariadas.
Chariadas.
Yeah.
He was there, right? He was going where men are, talking to men as men, Latino men, talking to that part of our Latino culture. And he does do something that no other Democrat really does, which is he gets the Trump Gallego vote. And that is very different than anybody else in the party nationally. Certainly here in California, but nationally. And it seems to have worked. What does that say, if anything? Am I reading too much into that?
Well, I don't know Ruben Gallegos
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I know he's good friends with a buddy of mine, Jimmy Gomez, who's also a member of Congress, lives
Jimmy's
just
great.
right down the street from me.
Yeah.
Um, I think what he did fundamentally is he engaged with folks that we have not been engaging. I know I do. I know I have.
Yeah.
But by far and large, I don't think political consultants. Once they start doing the breakdown of the voter universe, and look at the propensity rate of voters and say, should we, engage them? I don't think they know how to engage them. Like,
Right.
I remember being in a political meeting one time, and there was this one individual. This person was white, and saying that so and so speaks Spanish so well. We should get them to be our spokesperson. And I was so curious. I said, how do you know they speak Spanish so well? Well, because I heard them. It says, do you speak Spanish? He goes, no. It says, well, how do you know? It's just so bizarre.
Yeah.
And I think that what Ruben Gallegos did so well, it's so fundamentally basic.
Yeah. Meeting people where they are.
Yeah, he just met people where they're at. He went to the charreadas. He went to the boxing matches. I'm a pugilismo. I'm a fan of boxing. I grew up in the region of Tijuana and San Diego. I mean, Alexis Arguello, who's Nicaragüense, Nicoya, but I remember seeing him fight. I remember Pepino Cuevas, Salvador Sanchez, may rest in peace. Eric El Terrible Morales from Tijuana, just scrappy folks, who were born into poverty, you know, uh, trying to make a living
Literally
and
fighting their way up.
fighting their way up. So I grew up in that environment,
Mhm.
obviously Julio Cesar Chavez. And so, some folks, find it, a brutal sport. But culturally, it's kind of like where I grew up in that type of environment,
Yeah.
And he met people where they're at, whether it's UFC, whether it's charreadas, whether it's construction sites, guys pulling up the Ford F-150 just want to know if the construction is going to continue.
Right.
If we're going to continue to build housing,
Right.
the housing has a lack thereof. It has an impact because if you have, a supply and demand, and um, you can't afford a house because the demand is great, but the supply is limited. You see
That's California,
the valuation goes up,
right?
and we can build. So in other words, it's not a world of absolutes. It's not either or. We can have clean air, we can have clean water, and we
But
can
haven't
also
we
build
ha
housing.
but haven't we made California absolute? Because we haven't built housing. We're not. Gavin Newsom came in and said, "I'm gonna build 3,000,000 housing units." I think we built 185,000, 200,000 6 years ago. Like, we're not even close. I don't even know that we're really trying, are we?
Well, I'll say this, and
Yeah.
I won't put this all on Gavin. I
Yeah.
think he recognized as the chief executive of the fifth largest economy in the world, the grotesque, housing shortage
Yeah.
and how it manifests itself in terms of homelessness, in terms of so many families, under one roof just to make ends meet.
Yeah.
But I think that local government up and down the state of California, and their inability or their intentional uh, um, um, blocking, if you will, of building, housing that's necessary. If you're not going to expand in suburbia, if you're going to go vertical and you're going to go up, and that means more density, if you
Right.
will, we have to be open to all kinds of ideas because we have to make California affordable for the working poor, for the working class, for the middle class, and that's not a partisan issue.
Isn't it?
Because I think a lot of times, us Democrats were paralyzed by the idea if we talked about these issues, somehow, some way would be viewed or perceived as marching towards the right, if you will. No,
Yeah.
not at all whatsoever.
Right.
Come on,
Right.
these are common sense things, man.
It's helping working people, poor
Yeah,
people.
let's get folks off the street.
Yeah.
If you are dying on the street, if you're dying on the street, man, and whether it's a tiny home, whether it's an apartment, whether it's a hotel room, getting them off the street sooner rather than later, that's a good thing. It's
Yes.
not a bad thing.
Right.
And get folks off the street and put a roof over the head. But in order to put a roof over the head, you can't just, wax poetically and pontificate on the issue of the crisis or the drivers of homelessness. You actually have to do. It's action oriented. So what I like to do is my values, my principles, I like to manifest them in the outcomes that improve the human condition for all individuals. In
Mhm.
short, what that means, get shit done. That's translation. Just get shit done. Just don't talk about the issue. Just don't go to a conference or a press conference or introduce this bill or that bill and you're searching for likes on social media platforms. It's not enough to say, I'm against, hunger for children.
Right.
Then go feed some
Right.
families,
Right.
move policies.
Yeah.
It's not enough, and I think that we're
Is it is it
stuck.
is it time to rethink CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act?
Listen, CEQA is a bedrock, policy of the state of California.
Yeah.
I think that it's not a world of absolutes.
Right.
We're not gonna just expand and build, like crazy and destroy the environment and increase, driving times and increase mileage and increase carbon dioxide and carbon, CO2 equivalent, NOx, SOx, particulate matter 2.5, all that ugly stuff what we breathe into our lungs and what CO2 goes into the atmosphere, which is atmospheric, that gives us the extreme weather patterns.
Mhm.
But let me say this, but let me underscore, we have to find compromises that improve the human condition, building, providing the housing necessary,
Yes.
dealing with the homelessness crisis,
Yes.
growing the economy,
Yes.
and putting people to work.
Yes.
And building, or I should say, breathing clean air and
Yeah.
drinking clean water.
Yeah.
It's not an either or. We don't
But it
live in a
has
world
been.
absolutely. It has been, and it
It has
shouldn't
been.
be.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be. Listen,
And that's got to be part of the Democratic Party solution getting back into relevance, right?
yes,
Is no one's saying switch and start, throwing arsenic in the water. No one's saying, um, y- uh, we, I think there's a growing realization that California has just gone down one way. We need to find a balanced way to do it, and we can do it.
we can do it.
We've been saying we can, but we haven't. It's time to actually start doing it.
It's within reach.
It is, right?
It's within reach. We
Okay.
can do it.
All
We
right.
can do it. So,
I'm going to switch to a tougher topic right now.
Yeah.
But I also want to be really clear with everybody in the audience too. I'm not a journalist. I don't aspire to be. I don't want to be. I let the journalists do the journalism. I'm interested in kind of the overall narrative of where we're at. But I do want to talk about the LA City Council situation with the tapes and all of that stuff. I have no interest in getting into the nitty gritty of this stuff. I do have an interest in talking about kind of what that moment meant in the broader arch of LA, California, Latino history, and then what it meant for Kevin De León's history. Is that fair? Fair enough?
Fair enough.
So I'm gonna leave it there. What did the moment mean?
It was tough. It was painful, profoundly painful, and I apologize most profusely for, after reflection, for not standing up and shutting the meeting down or shutting other folks, which should have been my role in doing so. And I was so sorry that I uh, helped cause pain and also disappointment, in folks. Um, it was a very difficult journey. It was very, very, very painful journey. At the same time, what I didn't do is uh, sort of kind of fall into a fetal position and sort of kind of throw my hands up and sort of kind of give up. Simultaneously, I continue to work hard. And as a result, we built the most interim homeless housing anywhere in the city of Los Angeles. We're the second largest city in America. I'm going to go off on a limb here and believe that we built more in my district. I led the charge to build more interim housing in terms of quantity, more than any other city in the entire state of California. Um, my staff went through a tough time too, but luckily I was blessed that they stayed with me. Almost everyone, minus one, two individuals. Large staff, city council in Los Angeles, you get about 28 staff members.
Wow.
It's different from the legislature. It's different from the Congress. LA is unique in that case. It's not like New York City or Chicago in terms of the legislative branch. But it was a moment of reflection. It was a moment of engaging with folks all over again. But it was tough.
Have you talked to Nury at all?
I have not.
No?
It's been a while. Ironically speaking, I'm not particularly close with her.
Yeah.
I'm not going to criticize
No,
her.
no, yeah.
I'm not particularly
Right.
close with her. It was a meeting that obviously that she called. But I have spoken with Gil Cedillo
Yeah.
and Ron Herrera. And Ron's, he's still beloved, among many unions.
Yeah.
Not just here locally, statewide, but nationally. And Gil, driver's license bill. He's dedicated his life to improvement of folks, regardless of your.
He's one of my
color scheme.
favorite people.
He's a great
Gil's
guy.
a good dude.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
What's next for Kevin De León?
Well, what's next? We'll see. We'll find out. I can.
You're
tell
not done. I mean, you're a young man. You've spent a lot of time driving public policy. You've been in the Assembly. You've been in the California State Senate. You've been on the LA City Council. You ran for U.S. Senate against Dianne Feinstein. A little bit maybe ahead of your time, because I think you're tapping into something.
Oh, that close.
You came very close. And
Yeah.
Californians were kind of saying, we need to kind of generationally move on.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm always ahead of my time. I got to slow it down a little bit.
Well,
and
there's
then
a
that timing.
there's a difficulty with being ahead of your time.
Yeah.
Right? Because you truly.
You catch that wave too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's, everybody else catches it later and takes credit and does its thing.
That's the way it works.
I know.
Totally.
Yeah, no, I get it. But you're not, what are you doing now?
In the private sector now.
Yeah. It's only been for how long you been out of office?
A couple months.
Oh,
now.
so it's just, yeah.
In the private sector right now.
Yeah.
working as in the private sector. It is a huge departure. It's a huge departure from the grind, the daily grind of politics, the daily grind of producing policy that hopefully helps improve the lives of ordinary citizens. It's a huge from the stress, the 24/7 stress of
Do you
being
miss it?
elected officials. Um, right now, I don't
You do not.
at this precise moment.
Okay. I
At
mean,
this
you do it for a
precise
long
moment,
time. It
yeah.
becomes a habit when you do it for decades, right? Like
Well,
that's what you know
listen,
it to
I
be.
was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee of the California State Assembly. I was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee of the California State Senate. I was the chair of the Democratic Caucus of the California State Senate and the first person of color, first Latino, to become the president of the California State Senate. And in doing so intentionally, I put people in positions of power to effectuate the necessary change that would be reflective of who we are as a great state. Ricardo Lara, put him chairman and appropriations committee. Um, Holly Mitchell, who's a county board supervisor today for LA County, does a wonderful job. I appointed her to become the chair of the budget committee, and that was the first ever. Like me being the first person of color to be the president, she was the first person of color, first African American, first African American woman to be the chair of the budget committee. And she did a hell of a job, exemplary. She did a fantastic job. So when you're in positions of power, you want to put individuals in positions to succeed, and not just other elected officials, but staff members as well too. You're not going to believe it, but I appointed the first woman of color, first Latina at the time, to be the chief consultant to the Senate Education Committee.
Mhm.
Now, be mindful. I want to put this in context.
Yeah.
Far-reaching blue liberal state that we are, California, or are we? Since the founding of the state of California, back in the mid 1800s, fast forward to 2014, we never had a Latino, Latina be the chief consultant to the Senate Education Committee or the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee. So when I was in the position, I promoted people of color, uh, very well qualified,
Mhm.
people who are very talented. Trust me, people who would give anyone who graduated from the most elite universities. You can be a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. You can go to Cambridge, London School of Economics, again, Harvard, Yale, et cetera, et cetera. They would give them a run for the money and then some. There were folks who, some of them went to Cal State schools.
Mhm.
They were hungry, hardworking, strong work ethic. If anything, my mother gave me
It's
when
underrated,
yeah,
man. It's underrated.
if anything, there's a lot of folks who are ambitious,
Yeah.
and in politics, as you know, there will never be a shortage of ambition, whether you're on the left or on the right or points in between. I don't care if you're black, if you're brown, if you're white, if you're Asian American, if you're racially mixed, if you're a right winger, if you're left progressive, if you think you're a Marxist Leninist or Trotskyite or Maoist or progressive Dem or a moderate, I don't care, man. Ambition the cup runneth over. There's
Mhm.
never going to be a shortage of ambition. The question is, will you have talented folks with bedrock values and principles who have a strong work ethic?
Yeah.
That's different.
It is.
You're always going to have politicians who are going to occupy positions of power. We have term limits. You're always going to have a turnover for who's going to be the next Speaker of the Assembly. Who's going to be the next president pro tem, the leader of the California State Senate? Who's going to be the next governor? We have a clock that ticks, that winds. And as the sun goes up and the sun goes down, you're always going to have someone who's going to fulfill that position of power. Now, whether they know how to effectuate the change or how to utilize power or leverage power to secure the outcomes that they desire, that's something entirely different
Mhm.
right there. And if there's anything that my mother gave me was just a strong work ethic and an insatiable appetite for curiosity.
Mhm.
And those two things, I'm going to tell you this right here. It may sound funny, but it's true. When I got to the legislature the first time, I realized there were so many things I really didn't know about. Hey, Kevin, how do you feel about healthcare? Universal healthcare, man. Everyone deserves healthcare. Healthcare is a human right. Hey, Kevin, how does healthcare financing work? Oh, shit. I don't know how that works, you know, how does single payer work? Well, I don't know, man. It's part of our political, sayings, man. Single, yeah,
It's a talking point.
yeah, it's a time. I don't know how it works, yeah. So I realized,
Yeah.
and then they say, I thought, carbon, carbon
Carbon.
is for carne asada, man.
Ándale.
Yeah, so why against carbon, man?
Right.
Carbon is good. We need it for our carne asadas. Cebollitas, pour the tecate over la carne. It's good stuff, man.
Yeah.
What's that? So, when it comes to carbon dioxide, CO2, when it comes to carbon, dioxide, CO2 equivalent with its lowercase e, NOx, SOx, particulate matter 2.5, and so forth, you know, I didn't know this. So I had to learn, and I had really good people. Um, um, Kip Lipper, who we sat down and I believe gave me, and he's still up in the California State Senate, who gave me, what would be a master's class or PhD class. And then at that time, I made it a point. I said, I want to lead on this issue of climate. I don't want to just be a person who says, well, because in a way it was intimated to me by folks. Well, Kevin, you're a person of color.
Mm-hmm.
You're Latino. You grew up in a poor neighborhood, a barrio.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can lead on the issue of environmental justice. Okay. But I want to lead on the bigger issues too. I don't want to be boxed in and say, okay, you're a person of color. You grew up in a neighborhood with, toxins, brown fields. That's what you should focus on. So no, I want to deal with the bigger issue. I want to deal with global climate change.
Mm-hmm.
I want to deal, with major macro policies. And I took the bull by the horns, and I had very supportive folks. And that's where I planted my flag. And that's when I made California, when we did Senate Bill 350, which would have been 50, which was 50% energy efficiency throughout the economy, reducing your energy load, 50% RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard. In other words, the investor-owned utilities, PG&E, Southern California Edison, San Diego
Mm-hmm.
Gas Electric, as well as the munis, SMUD, LADLP, the largest public utility in the nation. RPS would have to generate 50% of their grid electrons from I should say, from clean electrons, renewable energy, 50% reduction in the use of petroleum. I remember when I did that press conference, I had members of labor,
Mm-hmm.
building trades here to my right, and I had environmentalists to the left.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked together on this issue. I was able to get 50% reduction in energy efficiency and 50% RPS. I did not get the 50% reduction in the use of petroleum by the year 2045.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, when Trump gets elected in 2016, and I believed everything that Trump said he was going to do, and to no one's surprise and shock, he did it.
Mm-hmm.
In a mean-spirited way, but he says, I'm going to come after immigrants. What did he do? He caged children. He says, I'm going to get out of the Conference of Parties 2015, and I'm going to disrupt these climate policies by Obama at a national level. What did he do? He did that. So that's why I made California 100% clean, renewable energy state. He can't mess with that. I was criticized by many folks on the left as well, environmental groups from doing so because they didn't believe we would be able to achieve, that. It's significant because we're not Vermont, we're not Maine or New
Yeah.
Hampshire. This is
Massive.
the fifth largest
Yeah.
economy on planet Earth. Hard negotiations,
Yeah.
very hard negotiations, but we are well on our way. And be mindful, I want to say one thing
Yeah.
too.
No, good.
I was just told just recently by a good friend of mine up in Sacramento that last year, 2024, we achieved 200 plus days of 100% energy, which means the grid, right?
Yeah.
Derived from clean electrons, which power the lights. It powers your television set if you're watching Netflix, if you're making coffee, your washer and dryer, your refrigerator. When you hit the button that opens up your garage door, that's all driven by the grid.
Yeah.
And 200 plus days, we achieved 100% clean renewable energy. within the framework of a 24-hour cycle.
Yeah.
That's huge. So we're well on our way,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
It's a monumental thing, and, it has absolutely changed not just the way I think Californians live, I think it's changed the national, climate, and I think that there are people worldwide that are looking. You met with worldwide leaders on this
They're
stuff.
looking towards California for that leadership.
Yeah, but what I can't get past is that Latino voters are suffering more now than at any time, I think, maybe in our entire history. And and I wanna talk to you about the future of the Latino vote and the Latino voter in large part because our people have higher rates of being unhoused than they ever have before. Our schools aren't performing anywhere near where they should be. We've got the biggest wealth inequality distribution in California than any other place, maybe, certainly in the country, maybe throughout the industrialized world. I can go on and on. And for years as a student of Latino politics, I would
Mhm.
go, "Okay, I mean, I guess this is just kind of the way that these working class voters are emerging as something different." But things started to happen over the past decade nationally that have caught up to California recently, which is they're not just voting more Republican, which I, of course, understand. They're not just leaving the Democratic Party. They're looking to Trump, Donald Trump, as a way to say this is better than where we're at. And I don't wanna overstate it, but I don't wanna understate it either. Like, we talked about Gallego, and he's kinda seems to be, at least from my estimation, he seems to be charting this new path that's very different than other Latinos, that seems to be resonant. Trump won more Latinos, between Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and then he won more between Biden and Clinton, and then he won more between Harris and Biden. Like,
You
he
see that trend.
it's a trend now at this point. Once is an anomaly, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a trend. I just my hope is I don't wanna take anything away from the great work that you did at all. It's monumental. It's literally transformative. But where is that leader who's going to be fighting for our people on these basic economic issues with that
Yeah.
same passion and fight, with that same commitment, with that same existential view that we refuse as a state with California values. We simply refuse to have it be either or. That we can't have all of these great policies without poverty.
Yeah. Listen, Trump has hit an emotional chord.
Yeah,
It's very visceral, which is a complete opposite of a stack of far-reaching, comprehensive
that's right.
policies, right?
Yes.
So if those in control are just exclusively reading the Atlantic or the New Yorker or the New York Times, Sunday section, which I do,
I do
um,
too.
yeah. So and on a, uh,
No judgment there.
it's a huge disconnect between the working class. It's a huge disconnect with the working class folks, working poor. I know that because I grew up, in the working poor. I grew up where, the landlord would come, bang on the door, Carmen, Carmen, and my mom would be, Shh, cállense todos,
Yep.
you know, turn the
Haunts you
light,
forever, man. Haunts you forever.
like,
It does.
yeah,
You don't forget that. When
it's
you've
you
experienced
feel that,
that,
and this was ongoing,
I learned how to dodge bill
ongoing,
collectors,
yeah,
and I was there with you.
yeah,
That never leaves you.
yeah. Poverty is so expensive.
Hmm,
Poverty is so expensive,
hmm,
especially in this country.
yeah.
It is so stressful. We're gonna have to reconnect, and folks gonna maybe criticize it. "Well, we've never been disconnected." Yes, we have. Stop it. Yes, we have. We have to meet them where they're at, and it's not just a stack of policies, but it's also to it is we're gonna have to strike an emotional, visceral chord and connect with everyday working folks who largely have been, you know, avoided and discounted and made to feel invisible. Something that he's doing has struck an emotional chord. Again, I'm not saying anything that, some, pearl of wisdom that no one else has says. And I
Right.
know James Carville's been saying his stuff right there, and
Mhm,
other folks have been saying their stuff. There's a lot of opinions across the spectrum
mhm.
and how we have to revamp, you know, what our party structure is like, or not so much structure, but our policies and our messages, but there is a consensus that what we have been doing is not working.
Right.
There is a consensus.
Yeah.
So I know there's huge debate about how, or is it, and I like to use this, sort of kind of example, but for lack of a better one for at this precise moment, is there a silver bullet, or is it, a lot of silver BBs that sort of kind of add up, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this to your point. What was very disconcerting to me is Joe Biden, in his first 2 years, to his credit, really moved, you know, tens of billions of dollars of transformative policy. The drag is the benefits don't happen and folks don't see them and feel them for many more years well into the future. And he did something that was, by any objective measurement, very transformative,
Mm-hmm.
very positive, very proactive. Problem is that the communication. Problem is, as everyday worker, you didn't feel it, you didn't understand it, and it wasn't visceral. And what Trump has done in a very skillful way is intuitively he has gone to perhaps the demons that we possess as human beings. We're
Mm-hmm.
all complex human beings. We're all very complex human beings. I know some of my folks and in our my party, like to live a sanctimonious, holier than thou sort of, absolute life. We're very complex human beings,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not black or white. It's just not that simple. And we're gonna have to do a better job, you know, the obvious in messaging, but strike a visceral, emotional chord. I don't know who that candidate's gonna be in 2026. For I think it's 2026, right? For the presidency, or it's 2028. I'm
2028.
sorry, 2028. Yeah, it's midterms in 2026. You know, but it is absolutely incumbent and immediate for Hakeem Jeffries and for Chuck Schumer to do everything within their power to help Hakeem Jeffries, win back the House. If we're successful in doing so, it's merely a backstop.
Mm-hmm.
It's just playing defensive. You're not really moving anything proactively. You're just doing a backstop,
Right.
stopping every legislative effort possible. He's still going to issue out his executive orders.
Right.
He's still going to issue, and we'll still be dealing with the courts
Right.
there. But in 2016, when Trump was elected, and I have immense respect for them, but I didn't call Nancy Pelosi and I didn't call Chuck Schumer and ask him for permission. I didn't consult with then Governor Jerry Brown and ask him for permission, to move forward these policies, such as the California Values Act, also known as the Sanctuary State Bill.
Right.
I moved it intuitively because I knew that in Washington, D.C., the defense would not be strong at all whatsoever because they were not in a position to stop, to block. And, the Republicans for a long, long time, they've been playing the long game. They've been packing the courts. If we get the executive branch and the legislative branch and, in the Rose Garden, president signing an incredible bill, you have folks here, just waiting to sue in a nanosecond.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to a court, depending which district, where they're already packed with folks. I think what happens sometimes with us is that our concern is, did Mike Madrid graduate summa cum laude from uh, Yale Law School? Was he the editor of the law review on campus? Whereas on the other side, is like, oh, Mike Madrid got his law degree online at a law school at night. And how old is he? He's 32, 36 years old. And he's a right winger. And he's never, handled a trial case before in his life. Good enough for me. Let's put him on the federal bench
Mm-hmm.
because those are lifetime appointments. It's a long game. So we have to deal, metaphorically speaking, the Cal States are just as good, man, is what I'm saying. Or UC, best University of California public system, not in the country, in the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
We have to meet people where they're at, and we have to engage those folks. If we're not, you know, we run the risk of being a minority party. I don't want to say in perpetuity, being swing
Yeah.
quickly, when Barack Obama won in '08, I remember all my Republican colleagues. It was almost like they were they were not just shell shocked, but they were alone in the wilderness,
Yeah.
thinking, "I thought this is it.
Permanent.
This is permanent."
Yeah. Of course.
I mean, Barack Obama's ascendancy was so unique, so revolutionary, you know, that you had Republicans voting for him. The promise of America fulfilling, its values and principles. It's this imperfect nation that we are, and how we strive to make it better every day in some form, way, or shape. I thought Republicans would be in the minority in perpetuity. And then they just buckled down. They just double, triple, quadruple down.
Mm-hmm.
They said, we're not going to give this guy any victory, no matter how small. We're not going to be playing by the Republican sort of free market country club rules. We're going to block you. We're going to stop you. We're going to do everything within our power to make sure you're not successful. And moreover, we're not just going to do that. We're going to perpetuate that you're a Muslim. We're going to perpetuate that you were born in Kenya, that you're not a U.S. naturalized citizen. We're going to blitzkrieg.
Do Democrats need to do that?
Well, I don't say that they have to do that, but I think that we need to, they don't have to be exactly like the GOP, but we have to play tough.
Gear up.
We can't be going into a knife fight in the phone booth, with a plastic, water gun.
Yeah.
We have to toughen up.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, a whole stack of public policies that may be good, but also we have to figure out how we do viscerally connect emotionally with everyday folks there.
Been talking with Kevin De León. Thank you so much for coming on the Latino Vote podcast, brother. It's been too long. Let's do it more regularly.
Let's do it again.
Maybe
Yeah.
we'll have it back on the show.
What happened to Chuck Rocha? I heard there was a rumor that he got deported.
That'd be great for me, because then I can take the show over by myself. I'll ask Chuck. I don't think Chuck got deported. I don't know where he's at these days.
You better call him. You'll find out if he's in Tijuana.
Or in jail somewhere,
Juarez,
doing something, causing trouble.
Okay.
Brother, great to have you.
It was a pleasure, brother.
Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much.